What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to DoloresCannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Our next speaker is one of our authors, Natalie Sudman. And there's a picture of her book, Application of Impossible Things. And she has a story that is impossible to believe, but it was real. And you said for a while you didn't want to even talk about it. I tried trying to get her, the book's been out, I think, for a couple of years, but I couldn't get her to come because, I don't know, but you just didn't feel right talking about it. Maybe because it is so hard to believe, but it's real. And it's a story that is going to blow you away. Okay. Is it hard to blow you people away? Her story will. And that's why I told her, you tell all the details. Okay. I'm not going to tell much about it, but she was killed in Iraq. And you were dead. She's back, she's here. So she's going to tell you about her experience. Natalie Sudman.
The last time I did this, I blew out 3 microphones before we got one working. So that's my level of fear. If it looks like I'm shimmering up here, it's not because I'm vibrating at a really high rate. It's because I'm absolutely terrified. So I'll hope that won't happen. But I'm going to begin today by telling you very briefly how I ended up in Iraq and what I did there. And then I'll walk you through my near-death experience. And in my book, I went into a lot of detail that there's just really not time for here. So I've picked out a few highlights that I'll kind of go into. And I'll wrap up talking a little bit about the aftermath of being blown up and how my NDE informed and affected my healing and rehab. And I'll talk a little bit about how I think what I experienced can be useful in our everyday lives. I'm already shaking. Remember to breathe. And there should be time at the end for questions. So if questions come up, keep them in mind. So in 2005, I was working as an archaeologist for the Bureau of Land Management. And the Corps of Engineers put out a call to all federal agencies asking for volunteers to come and help work on cleaning up Hurricane Katrina damage. I volunteered for that effort, and I spent it about 2.5 months in Mississippi and Louisiana. And then during the course of that, I got to know a lot of Corps of Engineers people and people from other federal agencies. And about 3 months after I got back from Louisiana, one of these friends called me, and she said, "We've got jobs in Iraq with the Corps of Engineers if you want to go. You want to go?" I said, "Okay." Hung up the phone and went, "What did I just do?" But I really only hesitated for a second because it just sounded fascinating to me. So I deployed to Iraq in August of 2006. I was a government service employee of the Corps of Engineers, and I was managing construction contracts. I was handling contracts worth millions and millions of dollars. We did everything from water treatment plants, medical facilities, roads, to electrical substations, all kinds of projects. On November 24th, about 1.5 years after I arrived in Iraq, 4 colleagues and I were traveling outside the wire, visiting some of these construction sites. We had been to 4 water treatment plants and a road, and we were on our way back to base when the vehicle that I was traveling in was hit with the roadside bomb. When we traveled off base, we traveled in convoys, armed convoys. So in this case, because there were 4 of us, Corps of Engineers people, we were in a 4-vehicle convoy. We had a front vehicle, the lead vehicle, that had 2 guards in it. The second truck had my 2 of my other colleagues in it with 2 guards. My truck, I was in it with a colleague of mine and 2 guards, and then we had a gun truck with 3 men. And because this province had already been turned over to Iraqi governance, we also had an Iraqi police escort. So we had quite a few people on the road. So when the bomb went off under the vehicle, or maybe just before that bomb detonated, I left my body. It was an instantaneous shift that I called blinking. It was that quick. I was in the truck, head on hand, kind of half asleep, and then I was not. Where I found myself, I was standing on a sort of stage, and all around me were arrayed thousands of beings. And they appeared to me, these beings appeared to me to be made of white light. They were wearing long, dark robes. They looked like human forms. And I looked like myself. I was in a human form. I appeared to be sort of shimmery, made of light. But I was in my fatigues, bloody, ripped up fatigues, although I was not injured. I knew exactly where I was, and I knew exactly what I was doing. There was absolutely no hesitation. There was no confusion or displacement. I knew exactly what I was, and I knew exactly what I was doing. And what I was doing was downloading information to these thousands of beings. And it was like making dense packets of information available to these beings. I used my attention and intention, and this was, I didn't think about what I was doing. This is sort of unpacking it from later on, but I would put my attention on this information, and then with my intention, make it available to these thousands of beings. The information that I was downloading, it was enormous, and it was very dense. It could be described as broadly cultural. And I call it cultural in the sense that it went from every layer, from interpersonal interactions all the way up to having to do with broad energy flows that shape and create cultures, not only here in the physical world, but across time and space into other non-physical realities as well. when I was finished downloading this information, I communicated to these beings that I was done. I was tired. I didn't have any interest in going back into my physical body. I wasn't interested in the physical world at all. And this decision was accepted. It was an assumption. It was known that this decision was entirely mine, and that whatever that decision was, it would be respected. These beings and I existed in a state of mutual respect, personal responsibility, and cooperative creation. They accepted my decision. However, they communicated to me that they would appreciate it if I would return to my body. They conveyed to me that my particular skills with energy would be useful at this time in the physical world. And they made a few suggestions of ways that I could put those skills to use. And these suggestions and explorations were things that I had not thought of before. So they reignited my interest in returning to the physical world. So not unlike when that friend called me up and said, "Hey, you want to go to Iraq?" And I said, "Okay." These guys said, "Hey, you want to go back and do this?" And I said, "Okay." So I guess leaping before looking isn't just a trait of my physical world personality. And as soon as I agreed to these suggestions, I blinked to another place that I call the deep rest environment. And before I describe that deep rest environment, I'm going to pause here to try to describe some of the qualities and perspectives that were present in all the environments that I experienced. Others who have had NDEs talk about the incredible, indescribable, unconditional love that they existed within when they were out of their bodies. And I experienced the same thing, but for me, the phrase unconditional love, it doesn't work very well for me. For one thing, unconditional is a condition, and I'm very literal. And aside from that, the word love in the English language is pretty sloppy. You know, we love everything from French fries to our mothers. So I'm going to try to describe this feeling using different words. In this non-physical state of being, there's a profound sense of belonging. Everything about everyone that exists is not only accepted, but admired, respected, recognized, and celebrated. There's a cooperative, co-passion for being that permeates everything that I experienced. Everything there is effortless. It is just so easy. It's blissful, and it's filled with a joy that is so fundamental, it's only really remarkable from outside of that state of being. So imagine that everything you have ever thought, imagined, experienced, dreamed, or created was recognized to be valuable. To you, yourself, and to everyone else, to all that exists. Imagine that no matter what you do or how you express yourself, you belong and are valued. This is true. What was known to me, what was so basic as to be assumed, was just that we are each intrinsically valuable. And everything we experience matters, not just to ourselves, but to each other and to all that is. I use the phrase all that is instead of God, source, universe, whatever. A lot of those words have just personal connotations that limit my ideas. And so when I say all that is, it includes all that is. So that's the term that I'll be using. My experience is that we're always within and expressions of all that is, which is a beautiful force of infinitely curious and creative energy and awareness. How can we be anything but perfect? We are all that is, just as much as it is us. We are created by it, it creates us. We participate in it, it participates in us. We extend it, and it extends us. We are each individual expressions of the single infinite awareness. We are one, and we are each perfect, exactly as we are. We're so used to thinking in terms of hierarchies. The healer is more important than the addict. The teacher is more important than the arms dealer. These hierarchies of value are not real. I don't care how dull or weird or messed up we think our lives are here in the physical world. I can assure you that all of us are having a valuable experience. And I don't care how special we think we are. We are each uniquely special, every single one of us. Our experience extends and enhances everything that exists. We are each infinitely creative beings having an amazing experience just by being here. From the perspective out of body, it was understood that it takes some skill to even exist in the physical body, in the physical world. It takes a skill of focus to maintain consciousness within a physical body, and then to participate in a collective, cooperative, creative experience of being in this physical world. So we're all amazing. We're all jet pilots flying 50 feet off the deck, upside down. We are very cool, just by showing up here, just by showing up. So you can keep some of those things in mind as I move into the deep rest environment. This deep rest environment feels like a very private and spacious place. It's almost as if I fold so far into myself that I disappear and I become pure consciousness. And private as this is, when I first go to this environment, this space, there are two other beings with me. And they're kind of tuning up or tinkering with my consciousness. I didn't perceive myself as having a form in this environment. I felt as if I were just an organization of energy or an organization of consciousness. And they were tuning up that organization. So they were doing their thing and I was doing mine. And my thing at first was just going into a deep, deep state of relaxation and rejuvenation. And when I was finished with that, I did what might be called a life review. But for me, it was more like a casual wander through memories. I wasn't just revisiting snapshots or just kind of paging through those memories, but though, when I'd view an event or an experience, I could also see and be every effect that an action or thought had. And not just in terms of the immediate people that I was interacting with, but I saw or experienced an event's effect extending throughout the physical world and beyond into other non-physical dimensions or realities. And during this wander down memory lane, I had no interest in consequences in terms of sin or karma or any of those kinds of ideas. I paid no attention to whether I'd been good or evil, kind or mean, smart or stupid. There wasn't any judgment like that. There was only a personal evaluation based on my own interests and curiosity. And what I was paying attention to, these personal interests, focused down to three things. Number one, whether this or that action or thought had been particularly surprising in its effects. Even my human personality is drawn to odd juxtapositions and unexpected effects. So it's fascinating when something leads to something that I had never imagined. So that was number one. Number two, whether this or that event, thought, or belief had been particularly creative in its expression. Did I do or think something in a new way, leading again to something that I had never imagined? And my third criteria that I was evaluating things on was it fun? The conventional idea of fun has to do with ease, laughter, joy, sunny beaches, margaritas, right? My idea of fun was much broader than this. My definition of fun had to do with whether something was surprising, adventurous, whether it pushed my boundaries, whether it stretched me so that I learned or gained more from it than I had expected. I was interested in what I learned, how I had expanded my creative potential, and what the effects of that creative potential were on a very broad scale. I also I knew so deeply that it was assumed, that I knew and could actually see that thoughts create reality. Attention and intention create manifestation, as most of you probably know. And not just in the non-physical, but here in the physical world, because this physical world exists within all that is. The non-physical and the physical are one. Our thoughts don't just affect how we view what we experience. They create the actual physical manifestation that we experience as this reality. Our beliefs, thoughts, and imaginations are the creative force of the world. Our thoughts literally create individual experiences, manifestations, and the collective reality that we participate in. Even I sometimes go, I did not create this. I did not create this in my life. And I don't really have time to go into this in detail, but creating our own reality, people always have a lot of questions about this. So I'm going to say a little bit more about it. As a whole self, remember, the whole self has the broader and more complete view of things than our human minds do. Our whole self may choose to experience something that our human minds are not going to be thrilled with. This is possible. Our human minds, littered with cultural beliefs, judge those experiences. I'm sick, in pain, hurt, struggling, because I'm weak, I'm a victim of circumstance, I'm being punished. Most of us are taught that bad things don't happen to good people. This is not true. It's based on a narrow human perspective that good and bad exist. Hard things happen to everyone. The fun is in how we handle those things. It's possible to reframe our perspective to look for the value in anything that we experience. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. On a more day-to-day level of creating our realities, our conscious minds co-create with our whole selves and others. And our human cultural beliefs can get in the way of what we think we want to create. So say I want to be rich. I may strive for it, and I may believe that that's what I really want. I really do want to be rich. But if I'm simultaneously holding conscious or unconscious beliefs that rich people are greedy, mean, terrible people who will never get through the eye of that needle into heaven, I'm not going to let myself become rich, because then I would be greedy, mean, terrible, and I would never get through the eye of that needle into heaven. So I call these contrary beliefs, and we all hold beliefs that compete with each other. QHHT people probably really have had a lot of experience with that. Another example of how we limit ourselves, I may say that I want to be rich, but I may scoff at small amounts of money. You know, $5, yeah, thanks. This is not an invitation to abundance. Gratitude for whatever we already have, recognizing the value in whatever we already have, is an invitation to more, and it's an invitation to something better. All that is infinitely abundant. Judgment has no place in our creative potential. Everything we create has value. The trick is just practice, learning to look for the gifts within any experience, and to be willing to be shown the value. So that's my Cliff Notes version of creating our own reality. When I was finished sauntering through my life to date, I blinked back to the gathering of light beings, and we discussed in more detail some of the things that I had agreed to do for them and some of the things that I wanted to do for myself as well. And then when we were finished discussing these things, I blinked to what I call the healing environment. In this healing environment, I was with two other beings. One of these beings was like an old buddy, really good friend. And the other one was almost like observing us or learning from us or something, not too involved in what we were doing. In this environment, it was as if we were hovering above the scene of the blown-up truck and the desert below. And it was like we were looking down from maybe a 45-degree angle from about 100 feet up in the air. And from this vantage point, we could see the truck, we could see the desert, we could also see my body in the truck. And we could see that body as a physical body, and we could also see it as a matrix of energy or an organization of energy. And from that energy matrix perspective, we began to play around with healing my body. We would do the equivalent of waving a hand, setting specific injuries in the body. And as soon as we did that, we would see a sort of holographic projection of the future, of how that set of injuries would shape the future. And from that perspective of expanded awareness, none of these injuries were dire or terrible. In fact, they were quite funny to us. From that perspective, it was known and assumed that the physical experience is a temporary creative exploration, that the real being, our whole selves, are eternal and can't be injured. So whatever would be experienced within that physical body would just be interesting and even fun. So we were goofing around for quite a while setting these injuries. We would wave a hand and we would sever my right hand. And we'd fall all over ourselves laughing at this future that unfolded, me trying to learn to do everything with my left hand. We would wave a hand and the shrapnel that's in my head, we'd move it back a few inches so that I had cognitive difficulties. And we thought that was hilarious. Obviously, these things are not funny once you're in the physical body, right? It's absolutely essential to adopt that expanded awareness to understand this humor. It was like planning a movie. You can't hurt the actors, so it doesn't matter what horrors you put them through. It's not real. It's just a movie. So that would be the equivalent to the perspective that we had from this environment. Let's make a good story. So eventually we did quit fooling around and I chose my injuries. And I'm going to say that again. I chose my injuries. I chose injuries that I knew would place me well for what I had agreed to do for this gathering of light beings and for what I wanted to do myself. In fact, I chose this whole experience. I crafted it. I chose to live in a war zone, and I chose to be blown up. I can still vividly call up those holographic images that showed the far-reaching effects of this incident and the value inherent in it. And some of that value is not really translatable into a physical world mind. But I know that value is truth now. I experienced it. I chose to experience this entire incident for valuable reasons. And I'm not unique. In that expanded state of awareness, it was obvious that we all choose our experiences. And we create them for beautiful and valuable reasons, even if they don't feel beautiful or valuable when we're here within the movie, within our physical bodies. It may often seem a stretch from our physical mind's perspective, but even things that can seem endless and excruciating and horrific from within the physical mind perspective, even those things are known from the expanded awareness perspective to be ultimately beautiful, valuable, and even fun. For our whole selves, this physical world really is a fabulous creation. It's the equivalent of an exciting and adventurous movie that we get a hand in creating, and then we also get to participate in it. After I had set my injuries, I blinked again, this time to a sort of Twilight Zone scene. I was standing beside the truck, but it was as if I were between time. Everything around me was static. And here I met with 9 other beings, all of them intimately familiar with me. And some people might call these beings guides or guardians. I call them colleagues or battle buddies. And none of these beings that I encountered in any of the environments were authorities over me. We were each our own authority, and we were each available to the others to be partners in creative exploration, or to be of assistance to each other. So these 9 battle buddies of mine, or guides if you prefer, assist me with my goals. They maintain the perspective of expanded awareness while I'm focused down into a physical body. So they're the air traffic controller while I'm flying the plane. They can communicate with me in various ways, as probably all of you know, helping me to stay on the track that I chose to experience, and reminding me that there's a broader view, that a broader perspective than just the physical world's current belief systems about what's real. And I'll give some examples of that in a minute. Meeting with them here at the jumping off point, we again discussed the things that I had agreed to do for the gathering of light beings and the things that I wanted to do for myself. But when we discuss things, when I discussed things with the gathering of beings, it was like we were talking about things from the viewpoint of the project manager or the architect. And now we were talking about things from the viewpoint of the guy pounding the nails. You know, we had a very acute awareness that some things that can look fun and exciting from expanded awareness can seem very long and difficult once you're back in the body. So we talked about some of the ways that these 9 beings would help me with that. And when we were finished discussing things, I simply blinked back into my body. When I popped back into my body, the truck was still rolling down the road. I still had head on hand, eyes were closed. I had a flash memory of what I had just experienced, but I immediately put it aside to deal with the physical world that I had returned to, the mess that I had returned to. I knew without opening my eyes that we had been hit with a roadside bomb. And I knew that it was serious. It wasn't just scratches all around, which happens maybe more often than you might imagine. But 3 of us actually were severely injured by the blast, and the guard sitting in front of me was killed. My injuries, aside from a lot of shrapnel and cuts, I had, my heel was broken by shrapnel. The shrapnel was still in it. Both bones of my right forearm were shattered, and some of the wrist bones were broken. All the bones on the right side of my face were broken, and I had some pieces of my skull missing from exposing my frontal sinus. This was the best injury for jokes, because I had a real hole in my head. And the doctors also listed a skull fracture, which I think is redundant when you already have a hole in your head, but they did it. I had shrapnel in both eyes, and blunt force trauma injuries to my right eye that eventually led to a retina detachment, and that retina was totally tattered. I didn't know any of this when I opened my eyes in the truck. All I knew was that I couldn't see out of my right eye. So I had my hand up over my eye. I didn't even notice the wrist thing. So I was the only one who was conscious after the first few moments. So after I made sure that nobody else was bleeding out, and I did a few other chores in the truck. And then I sat back in my seat waiting for the rest of the team to come. And I was kind of trying to see out the window, but it's ballistic glass, which is very thick and is all cobweb shattered, so it was hard to see out. But I was kind of trying to look out the window, and I was thinking about this eye, wondering how bad it was. And all of a sudden, I had a memory of a dream that I had had about 20 years earlier. In this dream, I was visiting my grandmother. She had passed over a couple years before, and in her physical life, she wasn't blind. But in this dream, she was blind, and she was making these beautiful pictures in my mind. And I said, "Grandma, how can you make these beautiful pictures in my mind when you can't see?" And as soon as I said it, I went, "Oh, duh." And she said, "Natalie, you don't need eyes to see." And as soon as I thought of this dream, I got so excited. I wondered, if I can't see out of that eye, will that help me see other worlds more clearly? And I was so excited. A thrill went through my whole body. I thought, this is going to be so cool. I realize how demented this sounds. To be excited to be blind in one eye. But this was a really powerful moment. It was a moment completely devoid of fear. It was a moment, I was entirely present in that moment, and that moment was completely informed by curiosity. I was focused entirely on the excitement of experiencing something I had never experienced before, something new, something fun. A couple weeks later, lying in my room at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, I wasn't feeling the thrill anymore. I was lying there all drugged up and unable to move, and I was thinking, you know, I really want to be able to see out of two eyes. I'm an artist. I want to be able to see. So I'm kind of whining to myself. And all of a sudden, a thought came into my head. It doesn't matter. It's only for 40 more years. And yeah, that's at least as demented as getting excited about losing sight in one eye, right? And it shocked me out of my sort of drugged reverie, and I started laughing because it just sounded so absurd. Only 40 years. But I had a sort of split awareness. You know, I was aware of that, but I was also fully aware and felt the truth of that. It's only for 40 more years. It doesn't matter. Moments like these happened all through my month as an inpatient at Walter Reed and continued throughout the 3 years of my rehab at being an outpatient. And in fact, they still continue to this day. And I understand these moments as truth, as expanded awareness, my whole self, finding a way through my belief-littered conscious human mind to wake me back up. These moments are the foundation of my experience of being blown up. The Buddhists have a saying, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. I'm not a victim of anything or anyone. Knowing that I crafted this experience for valuable reasons, and that I chose my injuries, I chose them, for valuable creative reasons toward shaping my future physical world experiences, suffering becomes impossible. Knowing that I am more than my physical body, and knowing that I am the creative force in my exploration in this life, every single experience has the potential to be interesting and fun. I don't always remember this, but the choice to practice being willing to be open to that perspective, that choice is always available. Expanded perspectives may sometimes seem pretty difficult or even impossible in this physical world, but I believe that they do have physical world applications. They can inform and transform the way that we live. Knowing that we're more than our physical bodies has the potential to help us navigate this physical world differently. We've been taught or tend to believe in a here and a there. We make a distinction between the spiritual world and the physical world. But for me, those lines are artificial. The here is part of the there. We are always more than our physical bodies. We are non-physical beings having a physical experience. And when we practice being aware of that simple fact, if we tell ourselves that over and over during the course of a day, for instance, we remind ourselves of the truth. I'm a non-physical being having a physical adventure. And reminding ourselves of this truth, we can begin to own who and what we really are and what we're capable of. We change our perspective of what we're experiencing. And when we change the perspective, we have the capacity and potential to appreciate and value absolutely any experience that we have. Any experience that we have created or co-created. We can take responsibility for ourselves and our own creative potential. We each belong here and there because it's all here. We are connected, supporting, enhancing, and extending each other's creative potential and beauty. We are each intrinsically valuable, and we create our own reality individually and collectively in a beautiful symphony through the power of thought, imagination, and belief. My NDE didn't change me into a human idea of perfect. I still get cranky and mouthy and impatient and obviously terrified. I'm lazy, I can be really scatterbrained, but within or beneath my emotions or thoughts is an underlying joy of being. And what I think is universal about experiencing expanded states of consciousness is touching that fundamental joy. Remembering that thrill of being, just being, the joy of expressing and exploring our own creative potential, and the intimate connection that each consciousness has with every other consciousness. I am not this body. I am not these emotions. I am not these thoughts. I am an infinite, non-physical being having a physical adventure through this body, through these emotions, and through these thoughts. I believe that we each choose to experience our lives as they are, while continuing to learn, create, and change from this present moment, always in some way enhancing us as whole beings, as well as enhancing each other's experiences here in the physical world, maybe most often unconsciously, but always with each other's consent. And I believe in the profound value and freedom of taking personal responsibility for everything that I create and experience in this life. I also believe in my own ineptitude and confusion within that creation, while simultaneously being perfectly and profoundly at peace. I don't think everyone's experiences have to correspond with each other's. The all that is infinite. As creative beings, why would we limit ourselves to just a few ways of doing things, a few ways of shaping things into what we believe is holy? Everyone, I believe, is in exactly the right place, at exactly the right time, doing exactly the right thing in this moment. We create our cooperative experiential future together. If we want to change our personal lives or the world, we have the potential to do that, to create something new by beginning to imagine something different. From that moment, we begin to make new choices and to change our manifestations. I believe that people have the capacity to figure out how to live together even if we disagree. I believe that we have the capacity to share even when resources are scarce. And I believe that we have the capacity to handle our own fears without taking them out on one another. If we individually acted from that understanding of who we really are, what would the world be like? I used to believe that one person's efforts couldn't make a difference in anything big, like war or racism or poverty. Now I know that each and every consciousness makes a valuable contribution to this world and beyond, no matter how insignificant or screwed up that person might seem from within our belief structures. One person changes themselves and the world just by imagining, in this moment, a more harmonious possibility. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions if people have questions. About anything, the blood and guts or whatever, it doesn't matter. Yep.
When you went through your life review, did you have to feel what you had done to another person, their emotion? Because I had read something like that.
No, I didn't. Did everyone hear the question? The question was, when I went through my life review, did I have to experience everything that someone else experienced? So if I did something mean, did I have to experience what that other person experienced? No, that was my choice, whether I wanted to do that or not, whether it was of interest to me, whether I thought it would be of use to me or not. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would like to ask you to share your point of view about what, the energies, the bad energies that we think are bad energies that are causing all the suffering in the world.
About energies what?
Like people, countries, activities that are causing the suffering, the wars, the suffering on people. If you can share how you see those.
How I see the energies of suffering of people,
I mean,
the broad flows of energies, you mean, that shape some of that? Or
sorry, maybe I'm not being clear. More, the people that are causing the suffering to other people.
Oh, people that are causing the suffering.
Yes, what's the role, or how you perceive them? Or
how I
what's
perceive
the reality
them,
of that situation?
They give me an opportunity to practice compassion, to deepen my understanding of compassion. They give me an opportunity to rise above myself, to rise above my beliefs, my human beliefs. They're bad, very bad, evil. I get a chance to quit pointing the finger and say to myself, what am I capable of in this situation? I heard not too long ago, I heard the Dalai Lama talk about, or someone told me about this. Somebody asked the Dalai Lama, what was the scariest thing about being in prison for 20, 30 years, however long he was imprisoned? And he said the most frightening thing was the possibility that I might lose my compassion. We're very good at, oh, that person is evil. We're pointing the finger. Well, that person is giving us an opportunity to rise above our own limitations and to really experience a level of compassion that most of us have never experienced. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to know if all these things you believe now, did you believe them before you were blown up? Were you as conscious before that as you are now?
Since I was a kid, I've seen spirits and worked with energies, and I've done readings beforehand. What this did, I say that this was not a revolutionary experience for me, it was evolutionary. So it deepened my awareness of some things. It sort of opened my mind to a few other things, and it certainly gave me a lot more confidence in what I was pretty sure had to be right. You know, I just feel that it's right, but you know how we all kind of doubt ourselves. And after this, that doubt is pretty much squelched. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you have continuing pain or disability as the result of the explosion? And if so, is that something you consciously chose?
I don't have, thank goodness, any lingering pain. Some of my, I don't bend as well as I used to, my right arm, and my right eye, they reattached this retina, but it was, like I said, it was very tattered up. And there was so much trauma to that eye, they ended up taking the lens out of it. And when this area of my face was blown out, some of the muscles were also destroyed. So there's no lens in this eye, but there is a retina. I kind of see blurry, and because there was muscle damage, it's tilted and doesn't track with the other eye. And there was a little bit of damage to the optic nerve, so it doesn't see as much light. So I see double, but I see like clearly and another shadow kind of double vision with that. Otherwise, I didn't keep any of the lingering pain. Thank you, me.
Natalie, over here. Thank you so much. Do you have any idea of what that place on the stage with all the thousands of beings, what that experience might be like for someone who left the physical via suicide?
Well, interesting question. I don't assume that everyone goes to a stage like that, first of all. And I don't assume that what I remember, the way I remember it, is the way it truly is. I assume that the way I remember it is a translation that my human mind makes in order to make this comprehensible. Because I can go back and have gone back to this scene, and I can change everything about it except the communication and the feeling of being there. I can turn all those beings that appeared to me as white light in robes into monsters. I can turn them into colors. I can turn them into smells. I've heard them as sounds. I have perceived them as separate from me, and I have perceived them as me. They are aspects of me. So that's sort of, I think of that as a translated experience. It translated into a language, a visual language, and a conceptual language that our human minds accept. I don't assume that everyone has this same experience. And I don't, in my experience, in my explorations, I have never found as someone who committed suicide that has had some kind of, I've never experienced that they have had anything different happen than anyone else. I mean, a lot of times, to me, when I look at a suicide, it's a choice. And it's a valid choice. If that's what you choose to do, you know, like I said, it's all respected. There is value in that somewhere for that person and for everyone else around them. So, you know, some people, whether they're suicides or not, I've had other people say, I know, I've been to a place like that, gathering. I recognize that. And I say, oh, cool. I don't think it matters whether someone does a suicide or if they die of natural causes. I think that we each choose. You know, like I said, the universe, all that is all that is. It's infinitely creative, and it's infinite. I mean, we can't really even wrap our minds around the idea of infinity. But to me, infinity has to include infinite creativity. So it's not only infinite, it's infinitely infinite, constantly expanding. And why would we all choose to go to the same place when we leave these bodies? That would be absurd to me. But did that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry, we've got someone here first. Okay, thanks.
Natalie, I would first just like to thank you. Your perspective has changed how I look at everything, and I believe you are a brilliant speaker. So, nervous or not, you do a very good job.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My question is, when you came out of the experience, did you have that broad understanding of the blinks and all that right away, or did that come in waves or pieces, or how was that experience for you?
I didn't think about it right away. When I was an inpatient at Walter Reed, very drugged up, at first I kept going over the sort of physical world part of the experience over and over, thinking, I want to remember this as it is. We very often alter our memories a little bit to make it a little bit more comfortable or a little bit more dramatic or something. And for some reason, I just had this urge. I felt I have to remember this exactly how it happened. I don't want to mix things up, and I don't want to add flourishes. So I kept going over and over it in my mind until I sort of had it memorized. And when I got out of the hospital, I actually wanted to write a book about working and living in Iraq in a war zone, because it was fascinating. But so when I got out of the hospital, and I still couldn't move around very much, I casts on everything and dragging myself around the house with one arm and one leg. When I could finally get my computer out, I wrote down that part of the story. And as soon as I did that, I thought, oh, this is really funny, because inside this is something else. Because remember, when you first popped into your body, you had that flash. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna open up that flash. And I just did a little, I'm ready. So I'm gonna try this, so any help you can give me, and boom, it came back just more vividly than any of the other memories, and it came back whole. And then I had to I would start to write it, and it didn't make sense to me at first. It didn't make sense to me in a way that I could write it down, because it wasn't linear. I tell the story as if it's linear, but it doesn't happen in a linear way. And so I had to sort of, I had to make sense of it. I had to unpack it, download it, and then unpack it in a way that would make sense not only to me, but to other people. So it didn't come all at once, or it came all at once, and then I had to kind of back up and sort of put it into a storyline that would make sense, if that makes sense. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you as well. Now, can you please help me understand this a little bit? From my point of view, what I see is we choose the life then, and probably the length of it, and how events will unfold. Therefore, even the the incident was already something you've chosen and planned, I believe, right? Because everything after that, again, it continues with your choices, which when you chose to go back and then continue with your journey. So I wonder if it was all planned way before, even including you coming to the place of choosing again, or is it that we go through life and then make different choices and then choose different things?
Well, I think that we all, I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it. I can say that when I've looked at this, I'm an artist and I like to create as I go. So when I've gone in and looked at this, for myself, I choose, okay, here's the broad outline. And within that, I give myself a lot of leeway to create as I go. And I also know that I gave myself a bunch of exit points, or what I call exit points. And I passed by about 5 or 6 of them before I took this one. And then, you know, that sort of that broad outline that I created before I took on this particular body and this particular personality, that broad outline is still there. I'm still kind of working under that umbrella. And it's a very, very loose umbrella in my case, so that I still have I've still given myself a lot of leeway to co-create with other people, with other beings, with myself, and yeah. Does that answer your question?
Because, for example, you said you have another 40 years, so that means you were accepting, you think you already accept yourself for 40 years?
I think I did. Mm-hmm. Yeah?
It's time.
Okay, it's time. So I'll be... Thank you.
What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to DoloresCannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.